Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers.
Literally heard the music in my head just then.
I do as well. When we do that. The second book in the Wayfarer series. I can't remember which series we did the first book in. Now, was it last series? Series 3?
I thought it was series 1.
Might have been series 1. It was many moons ago. And if you're new to our delightful podcast, you may not realise that we always start each episode with a terrible summary of the book. So something which captures the essence but out of context is kind of funny. So, for this book, what is your guys' terrible summary?
Mine is joining the war on autism on the side of autism. I love all of the weird characters in this book and their weird brains.
I need to apologise to Ro for just having knocked my pop filter with my mug of tea. This is terrible. I actually have, because Ro was meant to join us, and then because Wednesday has been cancelled due to a scheduling error, and adulting is hard. Ro cannot be with us, but they did gift me with a terrible summary.
Oh, excellent.
Is it an interspecies adoption if my mum was also an AI? Which I thought was pretty good.
That is great. I just wrote down that I genuinely speed read this because I just had to know what happened at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is basically me with any kind of flashback. So the start of this book starts basically at the end of book 1, where Lovelace, who was the ship's artificial intelligence, has been put into a new body following a total system shutdown and reboot.
So there was Lovey, who was the instance of Lovelace who had been around for ages on the ship for the first book in Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
Very much her own person.
Yes, and she died, essentially. She stopped existing because of hardware problems. And upon reboot, so the character that we're looking at in the second book is sort of a default factory reset version.
Yeah.
A fresh install, almost.
Yeah. So she's basically a new person who is designed to be the sort of central nervous system of a spaceship and be able to see out of a million cameras and be in every room at once and so on. And for plot reasons, she's now in a body kit, which is a human-looking, body.
She's got a robot body.
Yes, and it's about her sort of adjusting to being a person in a completely different way than she's used to. The idea that she might be a person at all, and sort of on top of that, navigating a world where she's not really allowed to exist. And it's very, very good.
It is quite an interesting setup. And there's also Pepper as well, who is helping her on this quest.
And whose backstory we get sort of... I think it does it's always alternating, isn't it? It's get a Sidra chapter and a Pepper chapter. And you find out that Pepper has also kind of come to the being a person from a different place than a lot of people around her, and was in fact raised by an AI.
After escaping from dystopian child death factory.
Yeah.
It is a tragic backstory.
My God, yeah.
My first question to you guys, how did you find the writing style of this book and the book structure? Because I found it a very different reading experience the first one, not in a negative way, but just the fact that the book has flashbacks. And simultaneously to this, I have been rereading the Stormlight Archive series, which also has flashbacks. And as a result, I think anytime I get flashbacks, I just have to keep reading. I unlike the first book, where I felt I could finish a chapter and put it away and then come back to it. With this, I just kept going and going and going and going and going and going and going. I was like, I need to know.
Which is so interesting to me, because I actually found this one easier to put down.
Okay.
Because I felt like they were discrete units, and then they were paired discrete units, So as long as you were reading 2 chapters at a time, I sort of felt like, you could quite easily put it down and come back, you know? Particularly once there started to be sort of time jumps in Pepper's narrative, because initially I think you're sort of following her quite closely, and then the further through you get, the more kind of time jumps there are.
A couple of years between scenes with her, or chapters with her.
But yeah, so I've actually found it almost more modular, is that the right word?
Okay.
Yeah,
which made it easier for me to put down, whereas with Long Way, because you sort of, it was all, I'm about to call it a run-on sentence of a book, which feels mean, but
No, but it wasn't segmented in the same way.
Yeah, things keep happening one after the other, and while I think there are chapters, it did just sort of feel like, oh, well, I want to know what happens next. I want to know what happens next, because what happens next could be completely different from, you know, what just happened, sort of thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's segmented nicely in my brain, this one.
Yeah. I read it all the way straight through without, like, in one sitting, which I pretty much always do.
Yeah.
Especially for books that are about this length.
Yeah.
When it comes to, like, House of Leaves, I probably won't be able to do that. but I think both this one and the last one, I just sat down and read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And, like, with the message boards and the emails in the middle, bits of that, I don't know. I feel like that I skim read them a bit. Like,
interesting.
It made sense, but I found it quite difficult to pick up because obviously everything's a pseudonym, like who's who, from the context of the wording. So I actually, I felt like I skipped those bits out because I wanted to find out what happened to Pepper. I really wanted to know like their backstory and what happened to them as a kid, and that was really, really interesting to me.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool, because I found those really interesting, and I found that I quite enjoyed the kind of puzzle of trying to work out. I mean, I think there's only really one person you can work out who they actually are from it, and that's Pepper. And that only becomes clearer once you get to the bits in the flashbacks where she accesses.
Well, you find out why she's named herself that online.
Yeah. But yeah, I think some of the most powerful oh shit moments I got from kind of, you know, the sort of putting it all together realizations happened from those bit interludes.
Yeah, because that's where you see that she's been searching for the ship consistently her whole life.
Yeah.
You know, the ship where she grew up.
And until that point in the narrative, I had sort of been assuming that what had happened with her and Owl was more...
Is that Owl had died also, rather than being lost.
Well, actually, no. I had sort of... I think maybe because it's a Becky Chambers, or because I was in the soft and cozy place. So in my head, I was thinking, well, presumably it's kind of like what happens with your parents normally, you know, where you grow up and you don't see them as much anymore because you've got your own life and maybe you live on a different planet, you know. So that kind of hit me like a bit of a bolt out of the blue. The kind of the realization that she's been looking and you know, that she's, you know, it's been years with nothing, and you sort of go, how on earth did that happen? And so that was like a whoa shit moment for me. But yeah, I thought it had some interesting kind of, like, the AI background is in those bits, because that's the bit where you meet different people talking about, like, often Pepper's asking questions because she's trying to help Sidra kind of, you know, acclimate or get rid of her honesty protocol or any of those things. And it gives you a wider view on, like, you know, what do other people think about AIs being people? And
yeah, sort of the broader universe context of it.
Yeah, like and you do get kind of a very broad range of opinions, including some arseholes, because of course it's, you know, it's the sci-fi space internet analog. But yeah, because that's a very different look at it to, you know, how Pepper sees it and how Sidra sees it, and also how Sidra's experiencing it, which is its own, you know, fun thing.
Yeah. I think the, now we're sort of in I was going to say epistolary, I don't know if that's quite, but, you know, now we're in the format of emails or text logs or something is a pretty common pattern in a lot of the sci-fi that I read. Like, you'll see that all the time in, like, I think you see it in Adrian Tchaikovsky's stuff, Ian Banks' stuff. And I didn't find it jarring as a switch in sort of medium.
Yeah.
And I also enjoy the sort of puzzle of putting together, how does this relate?
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't if it didn't relate, Becky Chambers wouldn't have put it there. So
yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think I had a couple of things that I was comparing this to in my head while I was reading, thinking about robots who are being people or learning about being people or coming to terms with the fact that they've always been a people. So the things in my head that I had were Murderbot and Ancillary Justice, neither of which use that kind of, here is some external information about how this universe works. You know, you're always getting it from Murderbot's perspective. I think there's a couple of short stories where it's an outsider point of view, but, Murderbot will say, oh, I looked such and such up on the space internet, but you don't actually ever really see the text of it. And similarly with Ancillary, like, Breck knows a lot of things and she doesn't tell you very many things, but there's no like external media perspective. But I think it's a really useful narrative tool.
Well, I think we have that in Long Way also, where it's like the news reports. You get to see those. Well,
you get a lot of I've forgotten main character's name. Rosemary. You get a lot of Rosemary's space Google, her Spoogle searches.
Yes, exactly.
Her Ask Space Jeeves searches.
Yes.
Which I think is quite, particularly since she's kind of the outsider coming into an established situation and learning how it works, I think is a really, like, it fits really nicely. But yeah, we could talk about the narrative structure some more, because I fucking love the mirroring. You know?
I did as well, yeah. It was a very nice, like, it was the same thing I have with Long Way to Small Angry Planet, is that it's a very cozy read. It's a very like quiet read. It's also very clever in its prose. And I think that falls into the way it's structured as well. But it pairs nicely. Although I just had to speed read all the flashbacks.
Well, I was thinking the way for me that it pairs most nicely with Long Way is that Long Way ends with them losing a beloved AI friend in a way that they can't get back. And Closed in Common Orbit ends with them finally recovering a beloved AI friend that they thought they'd never get back. So although the books don't have, I think mostly thematically and in terms of like who's in them and what they're doing, the books don't have that much in common. I don't think you don't have to read them in order. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the themes, they do have shared themes. Like, I would argue that they both have a theme of you get to choose who you are, and you get to choose who you want to spend your time with and build a life with. And whenever those kinds of autonomy are taken away from people, it's like a sort of sin against the world level of bad. This is so I think that's probably just because that's Becky Chambers' outlook, and so it comes through in the books.
Well, I suspect, for me at least, I feel like for Long Way that's more background radiation than it is in this book, where I think it's very, very focused on the process of making yourself and the process of understanding yourself, and possibly because it's more narrowly focused on two people learning that in parallel, it feels that felt like a much bigger deal in this one, in contrast to Long Way. Whereas for me, Long Way is a bit more about learning yourself in community, which is not quite what's happening in Closed and Common Orbit for me.
No, that's true. Yeah. I guess I was thinking of like Rosemary sort of, I'm not defined by what my dad has done. And,
that's a good point.
And actually there's sort of a whole world out there that I get to decide what to make of it.
And the way they talk about modders, which I mean, that's a nice through line as well, because Pepper and Blue are part of that community. So it makes sense in a way that that's a conversation that is had and then that carries on, into this book. A nice thread.
Like, to me, the modders are like the equivalent of like people who are DIYing their own hormones for transition. Sort of like outcast free spirits, incredibly sort of knowledgeable about these kind of things. People.
Yeah.
With the modders, like, it's definitely something that I think if I'd read it in another sci-fi book, if you think of it from a very practical standpoint, it could come across as quite extreme. Like if you hear people are putting, their credit card chip into their hand so they can swipe through something. Sometimes I'm like, that's a bit much. But you do you, crack on. But in this book, it's kind of like, although there's a very sad aspect to Pepper's backstory. And her childhood is horrible. Everybody's so kind. I don't know.
Yes.
Like, maybe I've read too much fantasy where there's like good guy turns evil, people are morally great. Everybody's just nice.
The villains in this universe are the systems.
Yeah.
You know, the system of capital and commoditization that has led to there being a factory full of slave girls who are just being genetically engineered as labour.
Yeah.
It's not that, like, any one person is driving that.
Well, like, it's very, like, the way that Owl gets taken away from Pepper is this very impersonal process that it's both that it doesn't see Owl as a person, but also that Pepper's rights as a refugee, there's no leeway for, you know, that's her home and her mum and her, you know, she's not a sovereign captain of it because
it's
she doesn't have a license. Never mind that she grew up outside of the system that requires a license, and they've established that she's a refugee. So why would she have a license? But there's this massive machinery of bureaucracy that just rolls right over her. And another thing that I think comes up in Long Way that I think is, you know, it's an occasional beat in this one that, contrary to a lot of, like, very popular sci-fi, humans are nothing in the, like, galactic, you know, the great peaceful galactic federation. No one gives a shit what the humans want or think, which is, I mean, both a refreshing change and, of course, causing many problems for our protagonists here. But it is, I think it's an interesting shift, and I do enjoy that.
It's not like human centric in that sense. Like, you know, there are, as discussed in Long Way, where there were people who went back to Earth to try and, like, be not cavemen, if I remember correctly, but, like, the original humans.
More like survivalist.
Yeah, survivalist. Yeah, that was the word. And then what I love about Becky Chambers' writing, and these books particularly with science fiction, is she's made a very complete narrative around many different societies and their structure. And the exposition, by the way, that's done is, like, Sidra will go to the parties and ask questions, and everybody's just nice. Everyone says, oh, you don't know? Okay, I will explain that to you. And it's not like, as a reader, you are also learning through exposition. But it's just very... everybody was nice. I don't know. Yeah. Everybody was really nice to Sidra. Yeah. Nobody, the tattooist was just nice. Everybody's nice.
It took them a moment to be like, okay, I've got to. So Sidra makes a friend who she asks to tattoo her, except it turns out that moving tattoos, which is the coolest shit ever, by the way, are incompatible with the body kit. And so
this leads to her status being discovered by the tattoo artist.
Yeah. And so there's an adjustment. And in some ways, it reminds me of when you get characters in the guard sequence in Discworld, where, you know, they all have, even the ones you really like, it turns out, are harboring some pretty nasty prejudices. And over the course of the books, you get to see them kind of grow out of it. And, like, actively take steps to kind of adjust their thinking.
Yeah.
And Tak, get to see Tak do that. And I think that's handled really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Apart from anything else, because it throws into sharp relief, like, the negotiation that Pepper and Sidra's relationship is. Because Sidra and Pepper are kind of having this sort of back and forth about, you know, what Sidra needs to do to, like, not be caught, but also to, like, you know, live her life to the fullest. And Sidra is asking for certain accommodations and how much is too much and how much is, you know... And Pepper kind of the barrier between, obviously, you get to choose, and as the person with the most experience in being a person, I'm trying to tell you from my experience, you need to try some other stuff.
Yeah.
But seeing that, I think they're in the middle of that argument when Sidra goes to see Tak, and it's like, oh, but it could be like this. The way that I think they describe it as, like, Tak looks to Pepper like she's looking at, like, a parent to, like, why is your child saying weird shit? Make them stop. And Sidra's like, no, I chose to be here. I made that decision. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a really fun kind of way of, I don't know, there's a lot of nuance and different experience and different approaches, and mirroring, that kind of clarifies how everybody relates to each other.
I want to give this book to like the least autistic person on the planet and see what they make of it. Because I was reading it and going, well, that's just what being a person is you're constantly interrogating yourself and evaluating if you're being normal enough and, am I doing the right thing and am I building myself out of solid blocks? But I don't know how much of that is my brain and how much of that is relatable.
Yeah. Well,
I definitely thought it was like quite, I mean, I guess I'm not autistic, and I think it is quite a useful way to be able to reflect on that I don't have to do that. And that it's it's a very, again, it's exposition by showing, not telling, which is, I think is a really good example of saying this is, if this is what is an experience of it is, to somebody like myself who doesn't have to go, why have they, changed their facial expression like this or like that? And through Sidra, you kind of go, okay, now I can empathise better through this book, which is, it's
See, it's interesting because I wonder if it's like, I think, although there are aspects, I think particularly like the sensory stuff that I think is kind of, I don't know, but I feel like everybody has been in that situation where you're in a new social group, or you're introduced to new people, or you're out of your comfort zone and you don't know how to behave and you don't know what your face is doing, and you say something and you realize that this is a massive blunder. Or I tell you what, I feel like Sidra doesn't make that many interpersonal blunders, actually. I feel like the main thing you get is that sometimes people ask her questions that she can't lie to, and obviously like they're the kind of questions that in everyday course that was another fun thing, was that it throws into sharp relief how much people do just lie, and that's like normal and socially acceptable. Like if you bump into somebody and they go, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" You're never going to say what's actually happening in real life, are you? You're never going to be like, "Oh, well, I wasn't, I was thinking about monkeys on typewriters making up Hamlet, and I didn't look where I was going," or, I don't know, my pet just died, or, you're never going to say that. You'll just be like, "Fuck off, mate," and keep going, or apologise, I guess, maybe, if you're not feeling confrontational.
Depends who's in the wrong.
It's those unwritten rules where if you're not, I think the classic one as British is if when you say to someone, "Oh, you're right," you're not expecting an answer. You're just expecting, "Yeah, I'm all right." And then that's the end of it. And then you say it to somebody who isn't
you don't say,
British.
"How's it going?"
And they go, and they give you an answer. It's like, no, sorry, I wasn't expecting an actual response.
Well, there's a few languages that I've been taught the beginnings of, where they'll say, "Actually, we don't teach you how to say, 'How are you?' until quite a way in, because you'd never say it casually to a person that you don't know. It's not going to come up in the kind of level of small talk that you get at the beginning language modules. It's if you ask that, you want to know, and you're going to get, either you're going to get a weird look because like you're not in the position to be asking them that, or you're going to get, you're going to hear about it.
I tell you what, like when she's like Sidra is learning about the like downloading all the information about different topics, and just because as an AI she was used to having bountiful levels of of storage space, and then she has to start choosing what to delete from her memory,
which is just an aspect of this that I would never have thought of.
It's a really clever way of saying, like, what do you consider to be useful information? It reminded me of a quote from the IT crowd, of all things, when the guy goes into the lady's office and her computer's like full of viruses, and she says, "Oh, well, you remember something like that, and that pushes out something else important." And it's like, well, no, what he's saying was completely valid. You're just not listening. It's kind of like, what do you consider to be important pieces of information is different between people, and that person's got to make it up for themselves.
And if it's comprising who you are in a very sort of physical direct way, you know, you won't necessarily, like, if you forget that you ever saw a movie that taught you something that is, you know, or shaped how you look at the world, if you delete that memory, do you delete the impact that it had on your personality?
Yeah.
You know?
And of course, we as human beings never actually have to make that decision because, like, that's not how the human memory works. You know, we can't prioritize that way. Which actually, this, you know what this made me think of is that bit in Elementary where Sherlock is like, oh, attic theory, I chucked it out. I chucked out the fact that the Earth is round and goes round the sun or whatever. If I'm not going to use information, I throw it out.
Oh, I mean, that's straight from the originals. Like, that's in Conan Doyle, yeah.
Yeah, but Joan as a doctor is being like, that is bullshit. You know that's not how the human memory works, right? I know you know that. Say psych right now.
the other memory thing that I also really enjoyed about Sidra being an AI is when she gets like the emotional flashbacks due to the sensory input.
That's such a cool idea.
So she smells something and she gets this like a memory of something else, and it's like the bit in Ratatouille where the guy eats the ratatouille and goes back to his childhood. But
it's somebody else's childhood.
It's a very important part of like a human experience where you smell something, you hear something, it reminds you of a specific memory that again, like as a human, that just you sort of kind of go through life. You don't really consider it. You don't really consider, oh, yes, I remember that my grandmother used to make this specific kind of soup. And now when I smell it, I think of her. But that's what that part is doing. Yeah. And it, again, I just really like the writing and the structure of it.
I was going to say, that's another thing that really made me, going back to what you were saying, Lottie, about how everybody's just so nice. As you think about the guy who made that body kit and the fact that he thought that was important, you know, this isn't a utilitarian body, you know, this isn't a basics only.
This is supposed to be a home. You know? Yeah,
this is like somebody went like and put serious thought into being embodied as a sensory experience.
Well, she talks to him later, right?
Yeah, she does.
She gets in touch with him and he's like, I'm so glad to hear that somebody is like, I'm so glad to hear from a happy customer, you know?
Yeah.
Or a happy user, because I think technically Pepper is the customer, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that we should talk about, actually, is the being able to lie. Because that's, like, I feel like it's a really, like, important point in her character arc, but also, like, another thing, like we were saying, you just don't think about the right to lie. And it is a right. Maybe it is a fundamental human right. You know?
Certainly other fundamental human rights either demand that other people act in ways they're not going to, or you have to be able to lie. Yeah. Like, you know, being able to have secrets. Yeah.
I remember hearing once, and I think it's is it Nero Wolfe? A quote about how it's not a lie if the person asking didn't have a right to the actual information.
Yeah.
Which is true of a lot of like the casual questions that maybe you get asked in the day-to-day basis. You're not necessarily gonna. But it was an interesting turning point for me because I felt like, so when the book starts, it's a thing that Pepper offers to do for her, isn't it? To learn Lattice, this programming language, and to get...
Well, she tries. I think Sidra jumps ahead of her and forestalls it by doing it herself. But throughout the book, Pepper is trying. It's not she's just not getting very far with it because it's not her thing.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing I wanted to talk about is Sidra, like, I don't know how much she knows that Pepper's working on it. I don't know if she knows that it is like a sort of... I think she does. I think Pepper talks about like, hey, I'm learning, but it's taking a long time.
Yeah.
And Sidra sort of gets impatient with it almost, or sort of goes, well, I could just do that. And that, I think, is one of the moments where I found her less sympathetic, in the sense that, to me, it was fairly obvious that like doing this for her was something that Pepper had taken on as a sort of an act of love towards her. And a sort of, you know, showing that she believed in Sidra's fundamental rights.
Yeah.
And was going to try and, like, get them for her. And then I felt like it sort of seemed like Sidra was hadn't realised that. Like, the sort of that there was emotion behind this task. And then just sort of did it. And and then when Pepper finds out that she's doing this and that she wants to, like, that she's sort of gone behind her back to remove her honesty protocol, I think it, like, she doesn't react. She's unhappy about it. And it's sort of, well, you were going to get round to this at some point, you know, sooner or later anyway, so why are you upset? But it's also that Sidra sort of took that away from her, the opportunity to have that done for her. I don't know. I thought that was something that the book doesn't go into a lot, is the decisions around that made by both Sidra and Pepper.
See, that's interesting, because for me, the way that read was that, so in the initial phase of the book, we're getting a lot of stuff that Pepper can do for Sidra, and a lot of the negotiation in kind of the middle phase, that, you know, where they have one really major blow-up argument, and then there's some smaller sort of tense conversations. But for me, the part of the book's theme being about agency and about what does it mean to, like, choose the bits of you that are, being a person and all of that, was that we're moving away from Sidra not knowing enough, Sidra being, like, very adrift in her new environment, having to learn this new body and learn to, things like having a job and hanging out with people and learning to socialize and getting used to this sort of the crippling anxiety of being in open spaces and all of this. And Pepper and Blue are doing a lot for her, and that's, like, you'd hope that somebody would do that for you in your time of life. I think that's a perfectly valuable and important part of Sidra's journey and, like, her and Pepper's relationship. But I think a lot of the book is about Sidra getting out of that place of being like, I can't do anything for myself. I don't know how any of this works. I'm super reliant on other people to do things for me, to protect me. And learning lattice is something that is a lot easier for her than it is for Pepper. It's a lot quicker.
Oh, I'm not saying she shouldn't have done it. It's just that there's an angle there where it's emotionally hurtful to Pepper, and I don't know if my I don't know how much I'm reading into that, or versus being something that the text is actually sort of saying.
Yeah, whereas I think the way that Sidra seems to be looking at it is that it's, you're right, there's probably a disconnect there, that it's a massive burden that she's put on Pepper and she could take away, that she's, it's the Ouroboros of the guys diving in front of the bullet thing, But yeah, I don't know, it's a new perspective. I definitely hadn't considered it as, like, certainly I think it's something that Pepper's doing because she cares about Sidra, but I also think it's something that because she regards it as a fundamental right, it's something that she'd do if she had to for anybody, but she's not enjoying it. Yeah, I don't know. Whether Pepper thought of it as a gesture of affection or not, absolutely didn't factor into my reading, which is, no, it's interesting. I'll have to go away and mull on that, I think.
I think also, I don't know if a parent reading this would have another perspective as well, because the other thing that occurs to me is it's a bit like, you are used to, or you assume that you have to do everything for your child, and before a certain age, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And then at a certain age, they'll start to be able to do things for themselves, and where does that leave you?
Yeah,
But I don't have first-hand experience of that, so I don't know how true, like how sort of how much what's in the book actually resonates with that.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that Pepper explicitly expresses about this is that she's worried about it being a very difficult change, whether, that it could have unforeseen consequences and it would be really difficult, which is, I think, a thing that I assume, I'm, not from personal experience, but that is a thing that parents have to negotiate, is the, like, I don't want my child to do this thing because it's dangerous or scary, but also some of those things you have to let people do. I think it's a bit how if you come to your parents with a big life change, and it might be, I don't know, transitioning, or you coming out to them, or I don't know, even moving, like changing
something
jobs.
Which is going to free you but requires risk.
Yes, yeah, and like, you know, changing jobs, moving to a new city, and they'll, instead of kind of immediately, I don't know, maybe your parents don't do this. I get a lot of the immediate responses like, I've thought of all the ways this could go wrong. Which I think is that maybe a little bit what's happening with Pepper is that she's mostly seeing the what could go wrong, and she wants to be the one to do it so she can be sure in herself that it's not going to harm her. Which, I mean, again, I think...
sort of slightly more darkly, at least if it goes wrong, it's her fault, and she knows how to deal with things that are her fault.
But then I think that's also... I remember being the kid doing this to my parents a little bit. You know, when you kind of look back in the mirror and you go, oh yeah, that's what was happening there. Where you do stuff like that, where you kind of, you undercut them without realising because you're, you know, you've run ahead, or you've had a thought before they could get to it, and then realising that, you've outgrown something that they wanted for you or that they were doing for you out of love, and not realising that maybe, you know, maybe that hurts from maybe from another person's perspective that would be, you know, painful or upsetting.
But, you know, those aren't reasons for the person to not do the thing that sets them free, right?
No, absolutely. It's just like one of those interpersonal conflicts that's gonna crop up over the course of like people maturing. And
yeah, and I mean, it's one of the things that I love about these books is that, like, as Lottie says, everyone's doing their best and everyone's trying to be kind, and still people do things that hurt each other or annoy each other, or, you know, and it's not the result of any malice. It's just because that is just part of being a person.
It's complicated being a person. Yeah,
exactly.
I was going to say, that's another thing, thinking about the everybody being lovely but things still going wrong or there still being conflict. One of the things that I think balances this book really nicely, because it is cozy. It is a good, you know, it's a good cozy read in many ways, but it also still manages to have stakes, and it also still, you know, what Pepper goes through as a kid is just, you know, it's awful. It's really hard. And because that's balanced with Sidra's much less tense narrative, it never gets overwhelming. But like, conversely, it means that like you don't get, it feels like there's a point to the story still. There's narrative stakes. There's kind of a because as you speed up towards the end, you're getting both we're getting closer to Pepper losing Owl, and we're getting closer to Pepper getting Owl back. So you manage to have both the stakes and the tension, but also, you know, it's gonna, as that one of them's ramping up, you're also ramping up to the resolution of that one in parallel. So it's, you know, you feel it and it's tense, but you also feel safe with it. You know, it's gonna come out all right.
You know, it's gonna work out okay.
Because you know you're gonna find out how it ends.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah. You're not going to be hanging around waiting for 20 odd years the way Pepper was to find out if it all works out. You know, it's going to happen next chapter, which I thought was very clever. There's a very clever balancing act happening there that I think is really nice.
I totally agree. Like it was because I was parallel reading this with the latest Stormlight Archive book, and I know in that, you know, your faves could die. Whereas in this, I knew everything was going to be fine in the end. I did have
a second where it crossed my mind that maybe Pepper wouldn't get Owl back.
Yeah.
Where was that? When did you think?
Before they went to the museum. So before Pepper had actually seen the ship again.
Right.
I think I knew that I thought that the way it was going to go was it wasn't going to be the same ship, or maybe that they'd get there and they could tell immediately that it had been completely stripped top to bottom and in a way that would have ended Owl.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and like, because I could see a story where like Pepper has to come to terms with that and, you know, use the memory of Owl to keep doing good for other AI people.
Yeah.
But also this is Becky Chambers, so that's not what happened.
I kind of had a feeling that I knew it was all going to be okay, but what that okay looked like, I didn't know.
Yes.
And that added tension. So was it going to be that like Pepper, Sidra and Blue were going to be content in their life, in their setup, in their in the shop and in their home, and they tried to find Owl, and that didn't work out okay. But now they're all,
or they never give up, but they never find her.
Yeah,
or whatever.
And you knew it was going to be all right in the end. But the fact that they found Owl, the AI, they got her out. Sidra got her the AI out, and
I really liked the way that was done as well. Sidra freeing up space in her memory by deleting stuff that she'd been anxious to not have to delete earlier, so that she could bring Owl home.
And, using the technique that Pepper suggested of, writing a note to yourself about what was important about that piece of information, so you could find it again. You could go looking for it again if you needed to, and you knew what it was worth to you. But that's a text file that's, very, very small rather than...
Exactly, the whole movie.
Yeah. But that was I thought that was a great, the fact that the end state that they end up with is, a mix of things that Pepper suggested and things that Sidra wasn't willing to compromise, couldn't compromise on. Because it would have been, I think if it had been a book where Pepper hadn't found Owl, or the Owl was gone, it would be a book about accepting things that you can't change.
Yeah.
At which point, I don't think Sidra's ending would have been the same. I think Sidra's ending would have been more about accepting her limitations and,
learning to live in that body.
The fact that, she only gets the omnipotent AI view when she's like a gremlin perched at the top of the wardrobe staring at people in the dark, which was a hilarious image that I could not get out of my head when they do the room rearranging scene. But because it's a book...
so cute, though. And yeah, and the way that Blue is just immediately I guess we have a new person in our household now, and I'm just going to be... out of my way to be as kind as possible.
Blue is lovely, and I think I really appreciated how he's this very calm space for both of them, and that Sidra's okay, well, I'm gonna go hang out with Blue in his art space, and we'll talk about things, and we'll talk about things differently because Blue has a very different perspective on this stuff to Pepper, but he's holding space for both of us, and he's not. There's no picking sides or anything. It's just hey, we're making we have a different relationship and we're making it work. I know, I like Blue a lot. There's something about Guy who is stuck in his evil tower, overseeing evil system that he can't get out of, being I'm covering the walls with art. I'm going to draw the places that I can't see anymore. And that's how I'm going to make this prison worth living in. I know.
It's very Homer Simpson, do it for her.
It was also quite nice just having that as an outlet in some ways, because sci-fi is always it is you with science fiction. It's very, I guess, easy on the one hand to be very absorbed in the technology, in the what cool new technology have you invented / implication of said technology, how does that impact that world, that solar system that we all currently as a reader live in. But again, I think it's Becky Chambers' brilliance with the writing and her say, he paints, and that's great. And it's got it has got everything and nothing to do with the plot. In some way, it's just he does it for
the entire point of anything is to get a guy like that to a place where he can have an art studio.
It's just it shows again. It's a show not tell about Blue's character, about how he's just very quietly listening to everybody and helping everybody without wanting to have be the centre of attention, to say, hey, I helped everyone. It was just nice. Everything in this book is nice. Everybody's nice.
And you get this, especially with Pepper and Blue, they do not take any day for granted, which is something I strive to do. But it's and that felt very sort of warm and soothing as well.
I think it's nice to have art in a sci-fi setting. And I think certainly the more of it I read, I think the more I see of that. And I think there's definitely places that there are sci-fi books and shows that are more interested in that than others. But I do like how important art is to this book, and not just that it's Blue's thing, but it's Tack's thing as well.
Exactly.
And the way that art can make you at home in your body. I don't know. That was, yeah, it's nice. It's good. We like some art in our sci-fi and some sci-fi in our art.
Yeah, and tattoos especially being, you know, here's a way that you can change your body specifically in order to take more ownership of it and be more connected to it. Obviously tip of the iceberg, but yeah.
That was another, like a little trick of the writing that I really noticed this read, was the fact that Sidra will, as a narrator, will talk about the kit doing stuff.
Yes.
And the kit doing stuff is always separate from Sidra doing stuff.
And then there's one line where she says, I think I'd like to be in my body for a while. Towards the end.
And then in parallel with Pepper sort of having moments where she doesn't understand what her body's doing because she was never taught. Like the things that she gets instinctively, and then the things that she has to, that her body's giving her signals that she has to kind of like pass out or ask Owl about, or that we can recognize from an outside perspective, but she's kind of having to muddle through a bit. Yeah, it's another interesting parallel.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lines I remember the most was when she was talking about, like, seeing an image of somebody else. I can't remember if it was in The Sims or if it was of Owl. And she goes, oh, and but this person has sort of brown fuzzy stuff above their eyes and on top of their head. And that's the moment at which because I think, obviously it must have been stated in Long Way, but it's been a while since I read that, but that Pepper has no hair. You know, certainly not on her head and her eyebrows. Yeah. And it was just such a neat way of completely, like, you know, her perspective is that, why would she ever know about that? Right?
Yeah. It's a very jarring, like, oh,
exactly.
Her life is not we've been kind of thinking of her as a standard human.
It tells you exactly what you can assume about her, which is not very much.
Yeah. And also that just the sheer level of fuckery, you know, it's not
it's heartbreaking.
The social or the cultural or the psychological that we're dealing with here solely. It's, you know, they fucked with her to the like level of her DNA and the fact that she doesn't have something as simple as eyebrows.
It's something that, like, because when we're first the Sim characters, and she's got the little figurines, and she goes into such great detail about these Sims. You're like, oh, that must be such a happy memory for her. And then you read Pepper's backstory, and it's like, because as an adult, you read Pepper's backstory where she's in this factory setting as like one of many Janes. One of these many children, and they're just called like Jane 1, Jane 2, Jane 3, Jane 4. So they have no identity to start with. And that they're basically, you know, in a workhouse a la Victorian times. But then, and I think it's mentioned that she has no hair, but there's no, like, I just assumed it was shaved. And then when she goes into the sim for the first time and she meets those the children who are in the simulation, and it's and then you kind of realise, oh, this is the first time she's actually interacted with someone who's not like a child in this workhouse, other than Owl. And your heart kind of breaks. And like you say, when Pepper as a child sort of picks up these phrases, and you know, you've got this child going out scavenging for dogs, like that, because she has to eat. And it's heartbreaking. And then when you come back to the reality, the sort of the present setting with Sidra, and she's speaking about these characters with sort of such joy, and so Sidra thinks, oh, this must be something that's really like good and exciting, and it is good for tiny child Jane, but it's just I don't know, it's so well written. It's so well written. It just hurts because it's such a sad. It's and also capitalism is bad, TM. That's basically what it is. It's basically like, you know, we worked out that it is cheaper
it's extractive capital, like, I mean, obviously capitalism in general, but like specifically the sort of you know, we've used up all of the materials on our world, so we can't even like make more new things. But it doesn't mean we're going to take care of our things better. We're just going to dump them on the other side of the planet and get you know, and how are they going to be restored and turned into something that we can use again? That's an externality. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, it's the extreme end point of the system that we currently live in, where I think there's a Welcome to Night Vale thing about if you could press a button that gave you a thing that you wanted but caused somebody else on the other side of the world to die, you would have a good model for how our current economy works. But this is the sort of the extreme end point of that system.
There's a bit as well where when the incident happens at the factory and that there's an explosion and Pepper is like 8 at this point, something like that. And, you know, there are girls around her who die. And she notes, like, she'd seen dead bodies before. Like, she'd seen dead girls before. And it's like, why? You know? It's sort of completely glib and sort of not spent time with at all. It's just like, you know, well, she'd seen dead bodies before, or dead girls before.
Yeah.
But that's not normal.
Yeah.
You know? And, I mean, in an over and above the ways in which everything about her childhood is not normal.
Yeah. Okay, I actually did have... I wanted to bring back a question, possibly 2 questions from when we did Long Way, which was, firstly, is there anybody here that you would fight? Who would you fight in this book? Because I think with Long Way, we decided we didn't have anybody, really.
I think maybe one of the people who handled Pepper's refugee things and just being like, oh, well, you know, the ship's just gone. We're not even going to bother to try to figure out what's happened.
Whichever dipshit set up that system.
Well, that's the thing, is it's not just one person, right?
Yeah.
That's the point, is it's an emergent system.
But they also, I guess, like, you know, are they just not following the rules, but it's the whole system. I want to fight the system.
It is a just following orders-ness.
Everybody's acting rationally in their own self-interest, and it creates this.
Yeah. But I was I think last time we decided, I didn't really have anyone specifically, I think because of, as we were saying, the system thing, there wasn't anybody specifically that I wanted to punch. But, is there anybody here that you want to hug? Who would you hug?
I think Blue would give really good hugs.
Yeah. No, I'm in 100% agreement with you right there. I think Blue gives great hugs.
And if I could hug Owl, I think I would want to hug Owl.
Yeah.
Oh, that moment where, like, Owl makes herself a body in The Sim, so it's as close as they can get to hugging. Oh my god. Excruciating. Also, just, like, the canonical hug is the best hug, actually, I think, which is the guy on the ship with Pepper who takes her into the kitchen in the middle of the night to be like, do you want to try all the spices? And then gives her a hug when she starts crying. Yeah. And that's a really sweet moment. Apart from anything, he's so scared of her crying. He's like, oh, you're leaking. That seems really dangerous. We should get the doctor. And she's like, no, humans just do this. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
But it sounds like he gives really good hugs. And that was an extremely cathartic and important hug. Since the invention of the hug, etc.
It's where she got her name, right?
Which I love.
Yes.
I love that, yeah.
Also, naming yourself is one of the coolest and most metal things that you can do. So,
Which is I think also one of the earliest things that Pepper actually says to Sidra is that naming yourself is important.
Yeah, you should choose a name for yourself.
Yeah.
It's a very, again, this book is just wholesome and comfort.
I'm going to make it unwholesome. Who gets the F-bomb?
Sidra. When she's learning the language for the first time and doesn't understand its meaning.
Sorry, Eli, you said owl?
I said owl because I think it would be funny. It would be funny if, like, you know, this 8-year-old bald eyebrowless girl comes, like, tearing into the ship and Owl's like, oh, fuck.
You need to go and read the side quest in the Cosmere where there's basically a tiny child that just goes around swearing. Mixed up and swearing.
I tell you what, I think the moment where Pepper finds Sidra's empty body kit in the ship they're taking to the museum, that's got to be a oh fuck moment, hasn't it? That's got to be the creepiest shit ever. Yeah. Is it time for the cat rating?
I think we are time for the cat rating, yeah.
There's not really backstabbing.
No.
There is crime, but it's like all basically ethical crime. It's not evil crime.
It is a little hijinksy. I think if you're taking something from a museum, it's automatically a heist.
I want to go with an 8. There is a cat right at the end, right?
That's true.
One of Sidra's sort of external like bodies that she can look through.
There is a pet cat.
Which is also, one day we're going to do Ancillary and Murderbot, and we're going to talk about extra AIs having multiple bodies. I actually... I would go lower than an 8.
Okay.
And this is not because I didn't like the book. As we've previously established, my rating and our rating and the cat rating are separate entities. Yeah. But as you say, I don't think there's a whole lot of backstabbing. There's no murder, really. There's one very small museum heist, one tiny little baby museum heist. But on the side of giving it a fairly high rating, there is a cat, and it is very cozy, which is a thing that Gothmog likes to be.
I feel like everybody in this book would adore Gothmog as she deserves.
That is true.
Are the characters likely not just to be cat people, but to understand that she's the most perfect creature? Which I recognise is not a criterion that we have really used before.
No, but it's interesting. I think we should consider it more. I think that is crucial to the cat rating, actually, or specifically to how Gothmog would rate.
Yeah. Am I appropriately recognised as queen of my domain?
Yes.
See, I would agree with you, Em. I think my personal rating of this book, which is a solid 10 out of 10, is different to the cat rating. I would probably give it like a 6, because
that's about where I'm at.
Only at the end, there is very little.
I mean, yeah, it's no Mogget situation, is it?
No, it's not Mogget. It's not Temeraire. It's not even like in, Witches Abroad, where. Not Witches Abroad, sorry, Weird Sisters even. But even Witches Abroad, there's a cat which is a central tenant to the book.
Yes. The plot doesn't happen without Grebo.
It's like the plot. I think she did acknowledge the cat at the end, and that's why I would say I give it a 6.
I'm convinced.
But
I think my own appreciation for the book was inflating the cat score. But
listen, it's easily done.
But
We've all been
my personal rating is like 15 out of 10. It's I genuinely cannot fault this book, her writing, this sci-fi series.
Yeah, I adore it.
It's brilliant. But that is not the cat rating.
Yes,
we must honour
the cat
rating.
Should we go for a 6 then?
Shall we go for a 6? Guys, before we wrap up, I would love to know, what else have you been reading, consuming, learning about, watching, that you want to share with our lovely dear listeners? This can also just be, I haven't done anything, because this is also a valid answer.
I have been... Well, Em and I watched an adaptation of Mansfield Park this week.
Oh, yes.
Which will be our next episode. I'm not yet clear as to whether or not I'll be able to be on the recording for that one, but we'll see. So that's a really awkward one to have brought up in this space, because I'm not going to say anything about it, because this is all for the episode next week. What else have I been up to? Not much, I'll be honest. Oh, we watched a film today. We watched The Great Wall.
We did.
With
it's
Matt
very
Damon
silly.
and various other people. It's great. It's worth a watch.
It's a brilliantly fun, very silly. Like, sometimes things are both well put together and extremely stupid.
Yes,
this is what this is.
Precisely.
Yeah, like, you get enjoyment out of it, but you also acknowledge it's batshit.
Yeah.
Why is everybody so colour-coded?
Yes. Got Pedro Pascal in it,
Yeah, Pedro Pascal is there and he actually talks. It's wild.
Whoa. Who knew the man could talk?
What have I been reading? I got a book for Christmas called The Garden Against Time by Olivia Lang, and I'm enjoying that a lot. It's kind of a mix of, I guess, pandemic gardening memoir mixed with, like, the history of, like, English landscape gardening.
Oh, cool.
It actually talks about Mansfield Park a bit, because there's a bit in Mansfield Park where they're doing the whole, we're tearing up our whole estate and just completely reorganising the landscape to better suit our aesthetics.
Okay.
And how that was often funded by money from slavery. And so, yeah, it's a really interesting mix, because it's some of it's very soothing, as gardens can be, and some of it's very like, this is, wow, there is some fucked up shit in the history of this. And the idea of, like, the garden paradise and returning to Eden and what does that mean and all of that stuff. Yeah, it's juicy. It's good. I'm enjoying it. Also, my friend got me a little bookmark that makes it look like I've stabbed the book with a sword.
Excellent.
And I've got that in that book right now, and it's excellent.
That is excellent.
How about you, Lottie?
I've finished Wind and Truth, the 5th book in Stormlight Archive, which came out just before Christmas. So I reread all the books. They're like 1,000 pages long. I love them dearly. I definitely, my fave, Adeline, had 10 out of 10 character arc, and then I sort of screamed at my sibling, who has only also just finished the book. and I have been doing the audiobook of Mansfield Park for our next episode. And I've also been doing a lot of like reading about Jane Austen history
fun!
Because I went to Jane Austen house over New Year's with a friend because it's like an hour and a half away from me. I was like, why not? And that's where she wrote Mansfield Park, and it's just
nice.
It's very cool. Would recommend, but it just, I don't know. It's I'm going to bring like I read a load of stuff on Wikipedia and the internet and the next episode, guys.
Absolutely. Gonna be one of our best educated episodes. That's what
I can try my best. But yes, next time, as we have mentioned, we're going to be reading Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, our final Austen of it's the final one we've got to do. So if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving it a like or review. It means a lot to us, and it helps our podcast find more lovely listeners like yourselves. And if you want to send us any book recommendations, you can do so via our social media or via our website. So say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see you next time. Bye!